A thought comes when it wishes, not when I wish, warns Nietzsche. And with that single line, he shatters the easy comfort of free will. Imagine gears turning deep inside the mind, whirring on their own schedule while you stand on a rain-slick city street, believing you're the engineer. From courtroom sermons on guilt to late-night promises of self-improvement, our culture rests on the conviction that choice is ours alone. Yet Nietzsche insists that unseen forces, forged by biology, history, and the relentless will to power, steer every decision. Picture slow-motion lightning splitting a horizon of quiet mountains. That crack is the moment his idea lands, unsettling, undeniable. If he's right, our most sacred word, freedom, may be nothing more than a beautifully painted veil over machinery we barely understand. Friedrich Nietzsche strides into intellectual history like a thunderclap in a silent valley, an unruly 19th century sage with a hammer, determined to smash every comforting idol of his age. Born beneath the shadowed Alps, trained in classical philology, yet driven by volcanic imagination, he wrote as if each page were a summons to rethink the foundations of life itself. For Nietzsche, the notion of free will was more than a philosophical puzzle. It was a cultural myth propping up systems of guilt, punishment, and moral superiority. Picture an old railway station at dusk, iron wheels grinding forward whether passengers consent or not. This, he suggests, is closer to how human action truly unfolds. While popular wisdom cheers, "You can become whoever you choose," Nietzsche counters that every choice is shaped by forces we did not select. Genetic impulses, childhood imprints, social hierarchies, even the invisible tides of language itself. Imagine a time-lapse of clouds casting shifting shadows over a vast landscape. Our decisions, he argues, drift on similar currents far beyond conscious reach. That claim unsettles everything we think we know about responsibility: courtroom verdicts, moral praise, spiritual redemption, even everyday praise or blame. If the self is less a captain steering the ship and more a passenger waking to where the currents have carried it, what becomes of justice, ambition, or shame? In the next few minutes, we will trace Nietzsche's ruthless logic, follow it through dark tunnels of determinism and out onto the dizzying ledge where questions of freedom, accountability, and human dignity hang in the balance. Stand on any open highway at sunrise, and the story our culture tells is as clear as the painted lines stretching toward the horizon. You are the driver of your destiny, fueled by willpower, free to turn left or right, accelerate or brake, conquer mountains or coast in neutral. From motivational speeches in neon-lit auditoriums to parents urging children to be whatever you want, the creed is consistent. Life is a menu of possibilities, and each individual is the customer placing the order. Advertising billboards flash promises of transformation, self-help gurus sell step-by-step blueprints, and courtrooms pound the judge's gavel on the presumption that the accused could have acted otherwise. We celebrate heroes for choosing courage, condemn villains for choosing cruelty, and whisper to ourselves that a different choice is always within reach if only we muster enough resolve. Nietzsche storms into this narrative like a rogue wave against a seaside pier, declaring that the freedom we cherish is largely theater. What we call choice, he argues, is the visible spark flicked off by invisible flintstones. Genetic predispositions, primal drives, ancestral traumas, linguistic habits, economic pressures, the inexorable push of the will to power. Picture slow-motion footage of dominoes toppling through a grand hall. Each tile believes it moves itself, yet every fall is scripted by the tile before it. So too, Nietzsche claims, our resolutions, whom we love, what we eat, even when we blink, are products of subterranean forces we did not create and cannot control. The conscious mind notices the action late, drafts a tidy explanation, and congratulates itself for authorship. He calls this post hoc storytelling a moral fiction, a comforting myth invented to justify punishment and praise, guilt and pride. If his diagnosis is accurate, then the moral architecture of society, a structure built on blame, merit, and the righteous claim that you could have done otherwise, rests on sand. The unsettling question that follows is not merely, are we free? But what remains of responsibility when freedom dissolves? Imagine a man walking down a crowded street, shoulders brushing strangers, neon signs flickering above. He believes he steers his own steps, yet Nietzsche whispers that every stride carries an invisible ledger of ancestral instincts, parental commands, half-remembered school lessons, and chemical surges no will can rewrite. From this starting point, Nietzsche launches his fiercest assault on moral responsibility. Society praises the charitable and condemns the criminal as if they authored their impulses in a vacuum. But praise and blame, he argues, are tools of social control. Clever levers designed to reward conformity, punish deviation, and keep the herd moving in roughly the same direction. Shift the camera to a clock ticking in a dim study. The steady rhythm reminds us that neurons fire, hormones spike, and thoughts surface on timetables nature sets, not ego. When a judge pronounces guilt with the gavel, Nietzsche hears an echo of priestly power, an authority that survives only by insisting the accused could have chosen otherwise, even as every cause behind that act stretches back beyond birth. Turn now to the raw scaffolding of human behavior, biology, upbringing, culture. Picture a child behind bars, though the metal here is metaphorical, formed by DNA, early nourishment, childhood trauma, spoken language, unspoken expectations. Nietzsche insists these bars are forged long before the child speaks in the first person. A compassionate act may trace back to a gentle parent, a burst of rage to genetic temperament. Even the languages we inherit shape the categories in which we think. Culture layers myth on top of instinct, telling us some desires are noble, others sinful. But the current underneath, the surge that actually moves us, remains biological and historical. When we applaud a hero's sacrifice, we ignore the evolutionary pressures that reward cooperation. When we condemn betrayal, we forget the primal fear of exile that once meant death. Enter the engine. Nietzsche calls the will to power. Visualize gears turning deep in a colossal clockwork. Every creature strives, expands, asserts, sometimes hides, but always seeks advantage, even when cloaked in altruism or humility. Where popular ethics hails autonomous choice, Nietzsche exposes strategy, subtle maneuvers to elevate one's strength, status, or survival odds. A saint nursing the sick, a tyrant crushing dissent, a scientist chasing truth. Each may appear governed by conscious decision, yet all pulse with the same undercurrent, the drive to exert force upon the world. The vocabulary of free choice is, for Nietzsche, a polite disguise we place over raw contest. That disguise depends on the illusion of a conscious self, a tidy narrator who claims, "I decided." Nietzsche compares consciousness to a late-night news anchor reporting events already decided in the unseen newsroom of instincts and desires. Neuroscience would later echo him, but Nietzsche needed only introspection. The real work happens below, then surfaces as polished justification. Picture a soldier marching in perfect formation. Consciousness is like the parade review, orderly and proud, while backstage logistical chaos remains hidden. We sense desires arise, label them my wishes, and applaud ourselves for having willed them, when in fact the deeper body-mind complex presented them fully formed. Does this mean Nietzsche is a strict determinist, chained to cold fatalism? Not quite. He rejects the notion of an external cosmic script, but he also denies the comforting randomness of free will. Think of a river carving its bed through rock, determined by gravity and terrain, yet capable of changing course when storms flood its banks. Nietzsche invites us to recognize the forces that shape us, then respond with creative self-crafting. Not freedom from causality, but freedom through understanding causality. In his darker passages, he concedes that most people, unaware of the river's pull, drift wherever current and culture dictate. Yet he also celebrates those rare spirits who, seeing the mechanics, embrace their nature, redirect impulses, and say yes to the total flow of existence, an attitude he calls amor fati. Determinism in his lens is not a sentence to despair. It is a call to radical honesty about the conditions of life, followed by the bold artistry of remolding those conditions where possible. Thus, Nietzsche's warning about free will is double-edged. If we cling to the myth, we perpetuate moral fictions that justify punishment, self-loathing, and societal control. But if we face the machinery, we might exchange shallow blame for deeper insight, replace hollow pride with genuine self-knowledge, and transform guilt into deliberate growth. The street throngs, the clock ticks, the child's cage, the turning gears, the marching soldier, all remind us that the play of life is set in motion by forces larger than any single actor. Yet awareness of those forces can spark a new kind of agency, one rooted not in illusion, but in lucid participation with the currents that already carry us. Picture a vast courtroom flooded with white light, every bench filled by centuries of accusers and applauders. Nietzsche steps to the center and declares the verdict no one expects. The doctrine of free will was not discovered, it was invented. Its architects were priests, judges, and moralists who needed a tool sharp enough to carve guilt into human souls. Tell people they are utterly free, and every failure becomes a personal sin. Every social transgression invites punishment. Every success crowns virtue. Chains of iron may rust, but chains of self-blame tighten with every heartbeat. If his charge is true, the pillars of morality tremble. Retribution loses its footing. How do you condemn a thief whose desires and circumstances scripted the theft? Praise deflates. How do you glorify a hero whose courage was likewise compelled? The scales of justice, so long balanced on the assumption that anyone could have done otherwise, suddenly tilt into ambiguity. We might still restrain the violent for protection, still educate the young for growth, but the tone shifts from righteous condemnation to pragmatic care, from vengeance to prevention. And what of personal meaning? Stripped of illusory freedom, life does not become empty, it becomes transparent. Responsibility transforms from blaming a mystic chooser within to understanding the web of forces that shape behavior, then refining those forces where we can. Compassion expands, arrogance retreats, ethics evolves from a courtroom drama into a collective engineering project, adjusting environments, nurturing minds, redirecting power. In exposing free will as a convenient fiction, Nietzsche does not abolish morality. He dares us to rebuild it on honesty instead of illusion. Nietzsche's warning cuts through centuries of comforting belief to expose the hidden mechanics beneath our choices. Biology, upbringing, culture, and the relentless will to power drive every decision before consciousness claims the credit. Free will, he argues, was fashioned to anchor guilt and justify punishment, turning social control into divine mandate. Once that myth is stripped away, morality must be reimagined, not as judgment of autonomous actors, but as compassionate engineering of the conditions that mold behavior. Picture a wide aerial sweep over a sprawling city at dusk, lights flickering on like neurons. Every window shelters a unique convergence of forces, none entirely chosen, all profoundly consequential. The question that remains is not, are we free, but how do we live well when freedom is mostly a story? Nietzsche's answer is radical honesty paired with creative responsibility. Know the currents that carry you, shape what you can, and affirm the whole river rather than cursing its flow. That might mean designing fairer institutions, cultivating healthier habits, or simply extending empathy to those whose paths diverge from yours. Freedom, in this view, is less a metaphysical power and more a practiced skill, an art of steering within constraints, of saying yes to reality while bending it, however slightly, toward growth. So the next time you feel the surge of pride or the sting of blame, pause and ask, which unseen gears just turned, and how might I guide the next rotation? In that mindful turn lies the closest thing to genuine liberation Nietzsche believes we can claim. If Nietzsche just rattled your worldview, I want to hear from you. Do you believe free will is real, an illusion, or something in between, and why? Share your reasons in the comments so we can map the full spectrum of perspectives together. If wrestling with ideas like this excites you, tap subscribe and join Intuitra for more fearless dives into philosophy, psychology, and the deep questions that shape our lives. Hit the bell so you never miss the next exploration, because the conversation is only beginning.